So my name is Wright. I'm a professor here at Cardozo. I run the Tech Startup Clinic. I just wanted to thank you all for coming out. We're really excited to have this event. I'm really grateful to co-host this event with Laurent, who's been very helpful in bringing some of these great companies and also house managers. So and just to kind of start off, I wanted to turn it over to talk about Evolve a little bit, and then we're going to have a discussion.
So thank you to Cardozo for hosting us for a second time. This is our second time this year, and so we're excited. My name is Mary. My name is Mary Jutton. This is our second Evolve Law event in 2 days, and so Jules Miller and I founded Evolve Law together, and we're super excited that we have been overwhelmed by companies wanting to join the community. So our whole mission with Evolve Law is to accelerate the pace of the adoption of technology, and by bringing everyone together for events such as this and for creating content, we hope to achieve that goal. So I just wanted to thank the many members. We have, I think, 30 members of Evolve Law, and give a shout out to Davis, Wright, Tremaine, who's our founding law firm sponsor, and our next event will be February 4th. We just finalized that today, and it will be on the investment side of legal tech, and that will be at Davis, Wright, Tremaine. So again, thank you to Aaron and everyone, and so we're going to have a panel, and then Jules Miller is going to come up and give our new piece of our program, which is a Darwin talk.
So the plan for the panel is to really dig in and talk about kind of big data and its impact that it may have on the legal profession. The plan is to have a brief talk and maybe open it up to the audience at the end for a couple minutes if you have any questions. So by way of introductions, we've got an amazing panel here with us tonight. To my left is Laurent Wiesel. He is the founder of a new startup called Justly, which uses data analytics to bring price transparency to the bills and the cost of the practice of law. Laurent was formerly a partner at McGuire Woods, and he was and worked with Sullivan & Cromwell, and he has his JD from Columbia. And next to Laurent, we have Toby. Unwin. Toby is founder of a company called Premonition.ai, integrator of a technology called Premonition, which really helps rank and draw data analytics as it relates to win loss rates, duration of cases with regard to the practice of law. Next to Toby, we have Sussman. Carl is the commercial product director of Bloomberg Law, Bloomberg DNA. So he's helping to lead Bloomberg's effort to build a lot of really interesting data analytics tools, which are getting rolled out into the market. Carl is formerly worked at Langford Sickert and Craig Gottlieb. He clerked for the Honorable Alvin Hellerstein, and he has his JD from Harvard. And last but not least, we have John Fernandez, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at Dentons. John served as President Barack Obama's Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development, where he was the Chief Architect for the administration's various regional innovation strategies, which we can all be thankful for. He's also the global chair of the Next Law Labs, which is a really innovative product or service that Dentons is just launched, where they help kind of incubate and hopefully accelerate legal technology companies. He's also, interestingly, the former mayor of Bloomington, Indiana, which is very cool. So kind of to get things going. So, John, actually, you did a recent interview with Bloomberg where you talked about one of the reasons why you joined Dentons was part of the firm's vision to build a law firm in the future. And this is, a question to you, but also to the rest of the panel. What does that law firm look like? What are we going to see in the foreseeable future in terms of technology adoption at major law firms and also smaller law firms around the country?
Well, first, thanks for inviting me and enabling me to participate with Evolve Law. I visited during one of your previous programs and really enjoyed it. Had a great chance to meet some of the innovators and entrepreneurs who are part of this ecosystem. We certainly want to be a part of that. It's kind of interesting when we talk about law firms of the future. What does that really mean? And I know that we're going to talk a lot about technology. But the truth of the matter is it's not just about technology. It's much bigger than that in terms of thinking about what law firms of the future look like. You know, we've got people up here who are a lot smarter than I am, particularly when it comes to deploying technology, and we're real interested in big data. But in many ways, when we're brutally honest, our industry, in many regards, is still in the wheels on the luggage mode. I mean, there's a lot of, kind of low-hanging fruit when it comes to innovation that is just applying some of the basics of process innovation as well as business model innovation that can really help our industry be much more client-oriented and aligned with our clients' interests. So when we talk about the law firm of the future, there's certainly a technology component to it, and how we can better deploy technology to give our lawyers better tools, give our clients better service. But it's more than that. It's kind of a cultural change that has to happen within the organization. We think it's a much more global outlook. We think it's a law firm that understands the notion of being polycentric and not having a kind of dominant national culture, if you will, because at the end of the day, you have to do deals and transactions and engagements in a community, and you need to know and be of that community. It's a much more agile organization. It's not just a traditional pyramid model from the business structure, which we think is just not sustainable, frankly, particularly when there's so many ways to source talent, source technology. Those are the things when we talk about the law firm of the future. It's not just about technology. It's much more about an evolving business model that helps us be stronger and more effective on a global basis.
Yeah, and I think at least one piece of that is technology. So I guess, to the other members of the panel, what's the types of technology that you think firms will begin to adopt, especially in terms of the employment of using a more data-driven approach to law, using data to automate certain aspects of law. I think we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts about where you see these the legal profession going.
Sure, I'd be happy to start, and obviously at Bloomberg Law, when we're thinking about the future of law firms, we think about it largely from a technology perspective, because that's really the space that we operate in, what kind of technology. And I think, the subject that we're talking about today, big data, analytics, machine learning, these are the technologies that I think are going to very significantly affect how lawyers do their jobs, in the future. And that's, a lot of that, frankly, is the business of prediction, right? What's the likely outcome in a particular case? Which way is a deal likely to go? What's a regulatory outcome likely to be? These are things that today assessments lawyers make largely on the basis of their experience and their intuition, and those things are important, and we're never going to displace those. I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but I don't think lawyers are going to be replaced by machines. But, we can bring data to bear, data analytics to bear, to help lawyers make those kind of analyses and that decision making. What I think the technology will do in the future, to an extent, is level the playing field. So again, today there can be a significant informational advantage for lawyers who have a lot of experience, for large firms that have a lot of experience in a particular issue, right? It's sort of easier for them to sort of predict outcomes, know what's likely to happen. And I think bringing big data, bringing analytics to, law firms of all shapes and sizes will level that playing field a bit and really require lawyers to stand out by focusing in on their unique expertise, right? So it's really going to be more about, my expertise and my skill versus just I know a lot of things that you don't know, because technology is going to bridge that gap.
We see that transparency is finally starting to come to law. So there are clients that can look at individual attorneys and know exactly how they perform with certain case types and certain judges, and then also with other firms' technology have a good idea of how much that's likely to cost. We believe that this is going to drive clients to pick based on attorneys as individuals rather than necessarily on a firm brand name. I personally believe that in the next 5 to 6 years, most litigators certainly will be hired using some kind of online platform. We're seeing many of those coming out. I believe the first platform that has price and performance transparency and can have a pricing model that actually aligns counsel and client interests, which the hourly billing model woefully fails to do, will essentially own law, because it will be such a better product, everyone will get it done.
Thanks. So I'll speak a little bit more broadly about how we look at the impact of data on the legal industry. And what we see is that data is transforming every industry, every profession, and every professional. And these data and data tools are going to have to be used by lawyers in the future, by law firms, and by their clients, and by courts. What keeps us up at night, what we think a lot about, is what that culture will look like, how data will change the culture. And it's not just about the law firm of the future, but it's about the relationship between the lawyers and their clients. And we think that with principles like transparency, widely available data, industry standard data that everybody could refer to, we will build a future where the traditional relationship of trust between counsel and client will be restored. It's not going to be this opposing environment where the clients are hiring their data people and the law firms are hiring their data people, and they're kind of trying to add data to each other. And that's something we hope will be avoided. We hope that the legal industry that comes out of all this will be a lot more functional and a lot more efficient.
Let's talk about some of the uses of data, right? So there's efforts to draw data out, to begin to put it in standardized ways, and that data can be used in a number of different ways. One, it can be used to feed into artificial intelligence systems to actually begin to synthesize and derive legal advice, or point people in the right direction in law. But we can also use the data to just draw out specific facts about the practice of law, about outcomes, and other things like that. And you can also use the data to actually consider the output of what lawyers are producing. So I think there's a number of different ways that it can go. What's kind of in the market right now, what's getting developed, and what do you think is kind of the next step beyond that, beyond what's currently here, but what we'll see in the next 5 years or so?
I can speak about Justly and what we're doing, and there are, as far as what the market is doing, there's some similar activity, but what we are doing is we're building a platform for processing data to be able to determine a fair, just price for legal services, and to get away from hourly billing models and kind of gut forecasting based on gut without data, which is all I did during my 14 years of practice. So, what we're trying to do and the way that we are positioning ourselves is as a neutral third party in the market that will facilitate transactions between lawyers and their clients and have them transacting efficiently at prices that actually reflect the attributes of the work, the complexity of the work, rather than the billable hour of any particular lawyer or the input costs of any law firm.
So I like to think about what technology can do as what I'll call sort of the first draft phenomenon. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So recently, at Bloomberg Law, we released a new tool that we developed on the company we acquired, frankly, called Draft Analyzer. And what the tool is designed to do is look at all the different contract language out there for a given provision in an agreement that we can find in the public database, which is quite extensive, and try to determine, based on looking at everything, what the standardized version of that language is. What's the market standard for a particular agreement provision? and then by giving lawyers that information, help them in their drafting. You can easily imagine, you know, an evolution of that kind of technology where, you know, machines are able to essentially produce a first draft for you, right? Which is take parameters of a deal. This is obviously using a deal example, which you can imagine lots of context in which you might do this, and go further than just sort of suggest language for you, which, you know, they can do now, or we can do now, but actually go forward, as I said, put out the first draft. You know, again, that doesn't displace the lawyer, right? There's always going to be, you know, the need for, you know, the lawyer's unique understanding of what's going on in a particular situation, what their client's concerns are, you know, et cetera, what's going to drive a deal, as an example. So it's not going to displace a lawyer, but I think it is going to allow lawyers to operate a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, again, I mean, you know, when we launched Nassau Labs, we were bombarded with many great pitches, and we get them on a daily basis now. And the range of activities are pretty broad. I mean, there's certainly the you know, the artificial intelligence deployments. There's a lot of machine learning tools. The thing that, frankly, I'm most excited about from an investment perspective are, you know, this whole group of companies that are really focused on getting more clarity and transparency into matter management, and doing it in a way that's pretty elegant from a, you know, if you're handling large enterprise clients, being able to help them visualize the data and understand where they're at, getting much more predictability into the budgeting on an annual basis of their costs, and being able to track matters. And I think that's important in terms of what we said earlier, in terms of having that trusting relationship with clients, being able to have some transparency into the process and not be surprised. But, you know, candidly, from the firm perspective, you know, being much better at managing the work. Because most law firms are for-profit entities, and, you know, we have to get better at the operations side of our business as well, because this isn't 2006. You know, it's a very different environment, and the expectations are different. We also see, you know, there's a lot of interesting plays in the risk analysis world. Compliance is an area where I think there is a right environment for some of the technology that could, you know, really rapidly, you know, scan, you know, millions and millions of data points for a company to help them better do some of the predictions and risk mitigation. But again, I think there's, you know, there's a lot of emphasis on, you know, the high-end kind of technology, but I think there's some basic things that we don't do very well. I'm skeptical about the, you know, the depth of the billable hour. You know, there's a part of me that would love to kill the billable hour, because I hate having to enter time, and I still have to do that. You know, I'm not a traditional partner of a law firm. When I finished law school, I did the, you know, the path where I clerked for a judge and went to a law firm. It was a big firm. I was only there for 3 years. In my third year, I got elected mayor. Thank God, because my billable hours that year sucked while I was running for office. All I kept thinking is, oh my God, if I lose, I'm dead meat. They're going to chain me to my desk. And then I did all these other things, and then came back into a firm in a very different capacity. And, you know, and one of the reasons I did that is I didn't want to be trapped in that kind of model. But I think that the challenge on replacing the billable hour is no one's been able to come up with an alternative that everyone trusts. So right now there's a lot of talk about alternative fees, and really it's just a way to get discounts. And so where data becomes, I think, very relevant, and where firms are getting much smarter, particularly when they're dealing with, you know, enterprise clients that they're handling, you know, hundreds and hundreds of matters for, is we can use the data to get much better at predicting the pieces of all the work we're doing for them, and coming up with something that both sides can actually understand and value, and then you can start talking about fixed fees that will handle all these things for the next couple of years. Based on our history, here's what we expect. I think that's when you'll be able to start doing more of the fixed fees at a big level. Because most of the GCs, not all of them, but many of them just generationally were lawyers at law firms. And they don't know quite how to redefine the value proposition of legal advice either. And so whoever can figure out how to do that is going to have a really strong position in the market, because it's tough to at the end of everybody just kind of reverse engineers it and says, well, how many hours is that? And it just, we're not there yet. It'll be good when we get there, but I think it's going to take a lot more time to get to that place than we think.
Yeah, I would just add on that I'm just old enough so that my entire career, the death of the billable hour has been 5 years away, and I'm also a little bit skeptical. Right. Right. It's always 5 years away, but there definitely have been changes. But the bottom line is, from a GC's perspective, who is after all the law firm's client, they care less about the structure and more about the number. Right? It's staying within your budget, as a legal department. So however they get there is sort of academic, I would say, to them.
So the point on the client is happy so long as they stay within the budget. I'm sure that is true in some cases, but ultimately that does not foster the long-term sustainable relationships that we want. We want law firms that are healthy. We want law firms that know what their costs are going to be and that are able to model themselves like businesses generally model themselves, which is to understand that there is a value to the work that they do, to understand what that value is, and to be able to access the data, to know what the value of the work is, to build in a reasonable margin, and hopefully the same kinds of margins that the law firms enjoy today, but becoming more efficient, becoming more proficient with technology. And then the law firm model changes, and that's when you can start to talk about really moving away from the billable hour in a way that will benefit the entire market.
Sorry, just want to make that one. Yeah, and I disagree with that, but I think we're talking at a very high level as if all law is the same. And there's very different tranches of work that our clients need. And some of it is very bespoke, high-level kind of work, highly complex, that a machine's not going to replace. And they're gladly going to pay the hourly rates that we often charge because it's just so complicated. Then there's that kind of middle piece that gets a little bit more commercial and repeatable. The expectations are different. And certainly when you get into a lot of legal work, where there's a big bulk of legal work that is much more process-oriented. I think when you get into that process area especially, you can use the data in a way to really build a lot more fixed billing structures. That I think that's an area that's right for that. And we're seeing it with some of if you look at the growth in employment, it's in this, the legal process organizations are growing a hell of a lot faster than law firms. And they've got a very different model. It's fixed fee, it's clear, everybody likes it. When you start moving up the value chain, it gets a little bit more complicated. So I think we have to distinguish between the kind of work we're talking about when we think about different billing structures as well.
How would you apportion the work that your law firm does in those categories? So super complex, the commercial, and
Yeah, I think most of our work, frankly, is in the commercial space. We up into the more complex. We'd like to do a lot more of that, but we are we're a global commercial law firm.
We believe that every major change and advance in law is going to stem from transparency. That's knowing how much things cost, and it's knowing how good the actual service is. And I'm not talking about was the client happy? I'm talking about, did the client win? So to do that, we've assembled the largest litigation database on the planet, and we've taught an AI system to look for which attorneys usually win before which judges, obviously, based on the case type. We believe that's a very unfair advantage in litigation. So going forward, we've been in talks with various insurers and reinsurers about making attorney selection based on performance a standard rather than based on brand or gut feel or peer recognition.
So we do pretty much the opposite, which is we look at legal work. We look at the legal work itself. We look at the work that needs to be done, the complexity of that work, its attributes, and then we find the most comparable work in the past. And then there's the billing data side, where we would weight the billing data accordingly. But we're actually agnostic to who is going to do the work, right? In thinking about the value, it's up to the client to, once armed with a proxy for value, to go pick the lawyer that they have a good relationship with, they like working with, which is an intangible quality that is very, very important to lawyers and their clients. And then there's also the question of the difficulty of defining a winner or not. The service was good, the relationship was good, and if you ended up losing after 5 years because you were in state court in Alabama, it doesn't mean that the work was valued less. So it's good that there are other companies that are looking at the other piece, because our clients will be able to ultimately to gain insights from them, gain insights from us.
So it seems like a baseline piece of legal technology infrastructure that's being built is data-enabled transparency. And that transparency can have a number of different effects. One is the price. Another one is potentially money involved for lawyers with regard to performance, to the extent of the caveat that it may not all be captured. But I think what's interesting in these various buckets, which I think we all agree, exactly. So there's lower end legal services, there's higher end, there's something in between. And I guess the question that I always think about is, where is this type of adoption first? Well, we can see it, like a lot of other industries, let's say Airbnb, where it starts at the fringe and then sort of works its way up the food chain. We can see a lot of automations, use of big data to deliver exceptionally low cost legal services, and lower end market for the most individual lawyers. And then we can see those innovations kind of lead up into larger firms, or is it going to be the other way around? We can see large firms really hone in and develop advanced processes and then have to push down to the sole practitioners or the other small firms.
Yeah, and I can talk about that from our experience at Bloomberg Law. I think that the firms who are most aggressive about embracing sort of the new technologies that we're developing, that others are developing as well, tend to be, I'll use John's term, sort of in that commercial tier, right? And I think that's for two reasons. One is that there's increasing cost pressure on those firms, right? The clients, GCs, the clients that they're working for are very conscious of their bills, right? They're demanding efficiency, they're demanding you be lean, right? And there's a lot of competition out there. If you don't do the work, there's a lot of other firms who are happy to try to take it from you. And so those firms are very concerned about doing things in the most efficient way, the most cost-effective way, so that they can operate in that very competitive environment. Then the second reason, I think, John, you also alluded to this, a lot of those firms are trying to get into, sort of that top tier, the most complex work where you need the expert of all experts who can charge essentially whatever he wants to. And I think there's a recognition that to do that, they really need first-rate tools. So I think it's kind of those firms in that middle, that commercial tier, who I think are going to be a lot of the early adopters of these new technologies. I don't know. You got some thoughts on that as well?
I think, it's not like it's just all happening today. I mean, just look at the history of e-discovery and how that whole discovery work has really been commercialized. I won't say commoditized, but really productized and commercialized. So I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of this already happening, and the typical kind of innovation adoption kind of world, you are going to start with some of those areas where you can then deploy technology in a less complex way and then work up the value chain. And there's certainly a lot of that happening. When you look at some of the evolution of some of the legal process organizations, when they first started, it was all about labor arbitrage. It was all about just having cheaper people. Most of those companies have really adopted some incredible process engineering methodologies. Some of the best ones, they have just a whole plethora of engineers as well as a few lawyers, and then they've got their coders and technology people, and they're moving up the value chain because there's other pieces of the commercial world. But at the same time, there are those who are looking at the more complex, higher-end stuff. So you're getting a little bit of both, from the top down and the bottom up, which I think is a pretty dynamic place to be. FinTech is way ahead of legal, but those industries are very interested in how you can move some of those similar kinds of deployments of technology into the legal world too. So you're seeing a lot of activity in that space as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. As fintech basically becomes, financial services basically becomes more software driven. So I read a statistic that Goldman Sachs hires more engineers than Facebook does. And some people told me that there's actually more engineers at Goldman Sachs and investment bankers at this point. So you can,
I think I read somewhere where I think it was their chairman and CEO referred to themselves as a software company.
Yeah, so they're now a software company. So if lawyers are going to now provide services to a software company who are pretty familiar with the data, with all the automation tools, won't law firms, even at the high end, have to start doing that. So I know there's a big trend to automate things like option contracts, loss derivatives, some executing really autonomously running. Right. So are we going to see kind of, are they going to just disintermediate the ability of lawyers to implement them? Their developers will be the ones that just code them up and deal with that technology? Or are lawyers going to have to start mimicking what's happening with the banks and have to start hiring people who are not necessarily lawyers to help them build these products that work with these automated systems in the financial services industry?
So to answer this, and I'll cover this topic and the last one pretty briefly, and just to reflect on some of what I've learned as a CEO of a software company after spending 14 years of practice. And one thing is that software engineers are not going to replace lawyers because software engineers love software, love writing software, and they don't want to do anything but do that. And they need a domain expert or a business person to state what problem needs to be solved. They're credible at solving problems, and if I ever go back to practice, I will have a work spouse who's a software engineer and writing software that'll help the specific cases. The other point I wanted to make, we were talking about market segmentation before. We can target who's going to change first. So first of all, things are changing really quickly. So financial institutions, for example, this is the fintech point. I mean, they are really open to innovation these days. And the bottom line for software is that if you have software that's accessible through the web or an iPhone and it works, then clients will use it regardless of the segment. And the sort of sales process is not the traditional knocking on the doors of the big companies and trying to sell your software. If it works, users will come.
Again, the first question, one of the first things we did at Premonition when we got our first data sets, who's the best customers? Obviously, they're the consumers. So we wrote a script to find out who they are. And essentially, it's insurance companies. They're responsible for 60% of litigation, and they're not the main party. They're very often standing behind giving writing a check. Them and large employers. If you have a lot of employees, you get a lot of litigation. So it's going to be the general counsel of insurance company and major employers that really set the future direction of what is adopted and what is not in law, because they're the ones who pay for it. I'm comparing legal tech innovation to fintech. Legal tech is a good 15 years behind fintech, and fintech is going to see explosive innovation because there's a huge incentive for them to do it. And law will gradually see innovation, which will, for the most part, not come from the law firms, and compared to fintech, it will take a very, very long time because a lot of the incentives to innovate are just not present in law.
So, when you think that legal services cost the U.S. economy, businesses in the U.S. $200 billion a year, right? Individuals $75 billion in legal spend to law firms. I mean, then you start to see that legal tech and solutions to that problem are actually fintech. You know, and you have banks as major consumers of legal services in the legal spend, legal system as a very, cost, huge cost on the financial system. So we think that solutions that are particularly market-based and that make the market for legal services, other professional services, more efficient, that helps the financial systems. And you can say that legal tech is fintech.
I mean, that's my personal area of interest. There's a concept called smart contracts. You can build with digital self-executing contracts. I've been building that. So I do think that there's an exceptional demand for these types of self-executing digital contracts, especially in the financial world. It's not inconceivable, and who knows how possible it is, that law firms will need to adapt to that at some point. I think that kind of goes to kind of a lurking question behind a lot of the conversation around legal technology, the use of data, the use of automation, improved processes, however you want to phrase it, which is, is this the type of work that will lead to contraction of the legal industry, or the software get better, that's at least some subset of the legal profession, that type of way will no longer be necessary, or will it be supported, actually leading to a larger legal industry, or a similar side of the industry? Roles are different, but untapped demand may get satisfied.
Let me take a crack at that, because go back to my public policy hat. I think you have to kind of step back and say, why do we hire lawyers? Who are good lawyers? What do we want them to do? Some of it's highly technical. A lot of it is kind of, you want a trusted advisor. I think we talk about training lawyers to handle coding and technology, and I think that's relevant to be able to deploy some of these new tools to be more effective the way you do. But if you look at some of the data on client satisfaction, what do our clients want? Certainly they want some legal expertise, they want efficiency, they want a high level of client service in terms of responsiveness. But at the end of the day, they want people who actually understand their business. And so, I think a lot of these tools, I don't look at it as replacing, I think it is augmenting and helping us be more effective. AI's got a lot of capabilities, but certain things it just can't do. And that kind of creativity and understanding how to really engage on the business side is something that I don't know if the machine's going to do as well as some of the experienced attorneys. But where I was going with all that is that, we look at the industry and a lot of people do navel gazing about, well, the industry's flat, demand's flat, we're going to contract. I think that in the world we live in, there's a huge unmet need. And if you're trying to serve clients who are working in multiple jurisdictions around the world, the problem isn't that there's no demand for more legal advice. The problem is they can't afford it in the models that it's currently delivered. So there's this whole unrealized demand. And it's not just on the corporate side. It's on the broader kind of access to justice issues, ability of people to be able to get the legal advice they need. And I think that's where a lot of this technology really can be a leveling of the playing field for people And I see it as a way to unlock a lot of potential to actually expand how much, quote-unquote, law is provided, because I think there's a hell of a lot of unmet needs, not just in the corporate world, but just in society generally. So I think that, by innovating, starting to think differently about how we deliver legal advice, deliver those services, can actually open up a whole era of expanding opportunities for people to have better access to justice, and for lawyers and the next generation of lawyers to be, highly valued parts of the world.
Yeah, I would just add on that. There's always, sort of this concern, right, that innovation and automation is going to cost us jobs. And that's particularly, I think, acute when automation and innovation are coming to professional services, which of course lawyers are. But that, if you look at the history, that typically is not the way it goes. And I'll say, look, I'm a lawyer. There are at Bloomberg and Bloomberg B&A, there are hundreds of lawyers, all of whom have jobs that are dependent on technology that wouldn't exist. My job wouldn't exist. Lots of jobs at Bloomberg wouldn't exist but for this, legal technology. So, the things that lawyers do may change somewhat, or there may be new opportunities to do the kind of things that lawyers haven't done in the past. But I don't think it's going to really cost lawyer jobs. I think the other thing to bear in mind on this too, and I recently read an article that made this point, the authors unfortunately escaped me, but you can't just look at technology. You actually have to look at the legal regulatory regime if you want to see whether sort of legal jobs are going to go up or down. If technology leads us to have a less regulated society, then there'll probably be fewer lawyers. But if it seems to be the case, regulation increases apace, then I wouldn't expect that to diminish the lawyers at all. We recently, again, at Bloomberg Law, rolled out a product focusing on privacy and data security, right? Which is going to be employing hundreds and thousands of lawyers over the coming years, again, in an area that 20 years ago didn't exist and wouldn't exist but for the proliferation of these types of technologies. So I would consider myself an optimist on that score.
Me too. And I'm an example of a lawyer making technology for lawyers, or maybe in my case, not necessarily for lawyers, nor for the market as a whole. But a lot of the products that we're talking about are direct to lawyers. And yeah, access to justice. I mean, that is a big part of what we think about. And in terms of technology taking, we see technology mostly as a tool for lawyers, but we also see it as an opportunity to take certain pricing determination out of the hands of the 200 largest law firms in terms of setting market costs, the cost, the expense of legal services. Primary reason why we have an access to justice problem in this country. So we think that once the cost is rationalized, value is aligned with cost, people will, open firms and offer services at a price point that they're comfortable with, and that will drive the expansion of access to justice.
So I'll just throw out 2 data points and maybe we'll turn it over to questions. But one is, there's a recent study that said that out of the 13 million small businesses in the U.S., 60% had a significant legal event, and 60% of that 60% so the lawyer in a cost business. So there's clearly tons of unmet demand. On the flip side, the World Economic Forum just released a report on whether massive trends in technology, Internet of Things, blockchain technology, and big data, and they identified opportunities and problems with them. And in the big data opportunities, one of them, curiously, at least to me, was that there'd be more legal work to be centered from it. So at least some of the experts that they assembled at the World Economic Forum seem to agree that this would be more legal work. So I know we've had the panelists have talked for quite a while. I don't know if anybody has any questions or wants to kind of continue the discussion above to hear that. So maybe I saw the person way in the back.
Hi. Out of curiosity, so you're talking about these developments as they're coming out of law firms. Do you think there's any, what's the takeaway for the for the general counsel sitting in the back? Like, you know, what should we be asking our law firms to do that we shouldn't, or what do you think we should be asking our law firms in the future, now that we have this kind of automation?
I would be asking as a general counsel, how often do your attorneys win? How often do they win my case types in front of my judges? How long do those cases go on for? How much does it cost? And how do those numbers compare to your competitors?
I'm not sure. Certainly, there's some innovation coming out of law firms, but if I were a client with a $500 million a year budget that's spent on outside counsel, and I wanted to control that budget, I don't know that my law firms are where I would go to ask for those solutions. And I think that the law firms that embrace technology and that embrace technology like ours are going to ultimately have an advantage over others. But I think there's so much competition now among the law firms, and the clients have such bargaining power at this point that I think for law firms it should be more about keeping an eye on the trends, going to where the puck is heading, and satisfying your clients that, as a law firm lawyer, satisfying your clients that you're aware of the trends, that you're moving towards them, and that you're embracing them. That lawyers are lawyers, and that technological disruptors do that.
I would just add that if I was a GC, I'd want to ask them what kind of technology they're using. You know, what tools are you using at the firm to make sure you're doing the work for me in the most efficient way possible? What tools are you using to make sure you're giving me the highest quality, legal work? So are they using Bloomberg Law? Of course, is what I would ask them. But more generally, what are you using? You want to make sure that your firm is deploying the technology they can to give you the best work and frankly, to do it in the most cost-effective way.
So the man in the yellow shirt.
My question is to Laurent. You mentioned about the idea of estimating the costs of any given problem beforehand, and the cost seems like something that would be proprietary information. Where's your data set coming from? Because you can't make a good estimate without good data.
So billing data comes from the customers, right? So we take billing data from clients, and we aggregate the data, analyze the data, and use it, share it with others, completely anonymized way. So
Why are they giving it to you?
because they want to have access to the data themselves, because we're in a sharing economy, and because they realize that the only solution to creating a more efficient legal services market is to aggregate, is to leverage data. And one client, Bank of America, they can do a great job analyzing their mortgage litigation data to figure out how much the mortgage litigation costs, how much it costs in Orlando versus Tampa, or duplex versus a house, or whatever the attributes are. But they probably do it well without a lot of mortgage litigation. But they would do it better if they also had Wells Fargo's data, Citibank's data, the other big banks' data to access. And we're not at all, I want to be clear, that we're not at all about sharing confidential information among customers. Definitely not about sharing information about what particular lawyers or what particular law firms have charged. There would be no opportunity for reverse engineering to figure out what any specific case costs.
But let's be honest. Many of the large companies have that data, and that's exactly what they do. With the early deployment of e-billing, the challenge for law firms is that our clients know our business better than we do. And you think about your typical, and I'm sorry if this all sounds so very corporate, but when you think about some of the large corporate clients, they're working with, a dozen, 20, sometimes even more outside law firms. They have a required utilization of e-billing technology, they can scrape all that data and do exactly the kind of work that we're talking about. So they know exactly at a lawyer level cost, not just at a firm level. So I think the law firms are just way behind understanding how to point technology towards our own internal billing data and timekeeping data, to be smarter about how we do pricing and managing our work. Our clients are doing it in spades, and they're really good at it.
And some of what the clients are doing is not helping. They're sort of leveraging their power in a way that will come back and cause problems. In fact, causing law firms to fail in some cases. So we think some balance, there is balance to be found. And it's not about throwing lawyers under the bus, but it's about trying to determine what a fair price is.
So I have a comment for you, the gentleman who asked about the GC question. I have a couple more things that I would suggest you ask your law firm. Not just what technology does your law firm have, but do your lawyers actually know how to use it? Because generally they don't, and they'll turn to an IT department. Like it's unbelievable what happens in large law firms. They pay millions of dollars for technology, and it's just there, and they don't want. So first ask them, what do you have? How does it work? Do they know how to use it? And then you want to ask, if you can, about their overhead. Because a lot of times they have to charge so much because they've got somebody that they're paying $80,000 a year whose one job is to print one attorney's emails and put them in binders and put them on shelves. And I'm not kidding. So, that's like reality of some big firms. Now to the panel, my question is, we're talking a lot about big firms, but most attorneys are not in big firms. Your students are not going to end up in the top 200 law firms, not all of them. They're going to end up in small, mid-sized firms. So how do we take all this big, you guys are talking big firm stuff, but the reality is that most lawyers don't work in big firms. And that whole middle market that we're talking about, and it's not even access to justice down here, it's that middle market, the middle class, and small businesses. So how do we figure out a way to take all that stuff and make it available to this $75 billion market that everybody likes to
So
talk
this,
about?
this is my personal belief. I think that is the area where it's going to be first, and where automation is probably the most useful. So a lot of that work, when it's lower and it's pretty routine, there's only a couple variables in the work. Not always, but there's a huge subset of that that's going to happen. And I think when you use automation, you reduce the transaction costs for people to develop that type of legal product. And when you reduce transaction costs, you build larger organizations. It's Coase's theory. So I think you're going to see a lot of collapsing of smaller law firms into one larger law firm that will still be one large attorneys that will do a lot of this legal services. And I think as automation increases rapidly, the role of the lawyer in that will be to answer questions and to be a shepherd for them to do the preparation and the drudgery of preparing this up.
My question just really builds, I was actually going to ask something really similar and just ask more. I'm interested in that middle market as well. I don't believe in the trickle-down theory, and the document compiling services are great, but they serve a group of people who already know what kind of legal services they need. So I'm sorry, it sounded really frustrated, only because I am. I'm old, I'm new to data, I'm old to the law. I go to these meetings, and everybody says access to justice and budget, and I just would love to know who's actually working in exactly the area that you're talking about. I work at a center for civil justice, so we do in a not-for-profit setting, and I mean, I try to find technology that will create efficiencies other than document compilation, and we're just not doing it. Am I wrong? Please tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, this is how what you look. So I mean, I think automation is the easiest way. The document assembly piece is a big piece of what I want to move on.
No, I'm not talking about, everybody's using the term data as though it's a thing. And there isn't a lot of distinguishing about, we're going to look at the data. Well, that doesn't actually mean anything. So is there somebody who's thinking about, are you from Dentons? Who's Dentons? I'm sorry, the litigation.
Toby.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm talking about
Yeah, actually, your question is quite a bit different from the other question. So perhaps I can ask the other question first, and I'm probably not qualified to answer yours. But I think that in the future, firm size will matter significantly less. Right now, I can tell you that a big law firm is actually better than a small law firm. Big law is 6.98% better than small law. However, when you look at the top 20 performers for each judge, only 7.7% of those top 20 come from a big law firm, because most lawyers tend to work in a small firm. And before 30 judges, there are no big law superstars in front of them. I think the future of law is not going to be, we have this 100-man bench. It's going to be, we have 1,000 folding chairs. We will get you wherever you need specifically for that case type for that judge. And we're only going to hire them on a local counsel basis for that case only. Then we're moving on. The need for a huge firm in the future will be less.
See you again. I have a very practical response to your question from our perspective in our experience. So, first of all, we rely on data, right? So, we can't, in terms of surveying the middle market, it's difficult to even fathom aggregating a critical mass of data for the types of transactions, the type of litigations that they face. You could go to 7 Wall Street banks and you could have the billing records for 70% of the IPOs that happened since 2005, which is going to 7 customers, right? So we have difficulty positioning ourselves for the middle market now because we are in data ingestion mode, right? There's also similar difficulty if you talk about the court system in this country, right? So federal courts are where most of the big litigation happens, and PACER, for all the problems with PACER, it costs $600 million to download every single filing off PACER. We want to do that. We don't have that kind of money yet. But even if we focused on only the PACER data, then we would be cutting out a lot of middle market litigation work, and then compare the systems the state courts offer, all over, and only half of them are even on the internet, and they don't have, some of them have great portals, some of them have really lousy ones. So there's a great challenge to serve the middle firm.
It's on the tip of my tongue, but there's several, I think there's several startups that are in the kind of alternative dispute delivery systems that I think are going to be very attractive to small companies and individuals and different part of the economy, because it's just, why go into the expensive kind of legal system if all we're really trying to do is come to a mutually agreeable outcome that everyone likes. And there's some really interesting companies doing that. There's some great startups that are working in this space to make execution agreements easier. So particularly in the area of child support, there's some great platforms that are being developed that become much better at getting some of the old kind of baggage of the relationships that have obviously deteriorated out of the system, so that there's prompt, continual, execution of agreements. So I think there's a lot of interesting work going on in a more, in more than just kind of big law. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're out there. They're in different places.
And I'll just do a quick plug, because I'm going to cut this off to work time. But part of what we're doing in Evolve Law, which Mary and I co-founded, was that we're doing legal tech toolkits. So we're mapping out the legal universe, and we're
the one all the way in the back.
So, ironically, I'm not a lawyer. I'm founder of a tech company that's scaling, and we have both sides of the fence, right, in-house, and of course we use out-of-house counsel. But I wanted to say something as somebody who's been in these positions on the other side of the fence, which I think was mentioned, but kind of there's a lot of other things mentioned, was that I can tell you is, I think a lot of this is about personal relationships, and we build tech like very senior tech, like algorithms, backends, the kind of things that lawyers are using technologically to aggregate some data or to help control their business. To me, it's not that concerning because how you run your back end of your office, not the back end of technology, to never build something like that, is your own bottom line. But I think it's about personal relationships, right? So the law firm we picked to like open our round was because before we even knew we were opening a round, they were taking us out to lunch and clearly not billing us. We hadn't even hired them, right? And they were checking in with us. So I think there's like almost like a prompt and circus that happens between these founders and these companies, like not your huge Goldman Sachs. And the other thing I would say about law firms spending so much money on all this like data to help your customers, the reason I went to you was not because you were going to buy data about something. I went to that firm because you've done that deal 100 times. So you know what the going rate is. So I really don't want you to look at data because data is faceless to me. As someone who supplies data, I can make it say whatever I want. So I certainly don't want my lawyer giving me that answer. I want to know how his deals went down and what I need to know when I go in to negotiate. So I would say as a tech founder, the idea that my lawyer would be using data to make those decisions for me is not what I want to hear. I want him to be using his experience because that's for her. That's why I picked that person.
All right, so I think we're going to turn it over to this gentleman, and I'm sure if you have other questions, the panelists will be around. So I just wanted to thank them for coming.